The Summer Nationals, held annually at the August Bank Holiday at Santa Pod Raceway, is usually accompanied by fabulous weather and huge crowds. This year, however, the weather has been less than kind to us. Let's see who's performing here this weekend. Well, European Top Alcohol produced some very interesting qualifying, and the lady who was leading the charge in the qualifying was the Bureaucats driver, Finland's Anita Michaela. Well, Anita has set her sights on the 1996 Top European Alcohol Challenge, and this weekend makes no exception. This lady has been hard charging all year and is currently leading the points going into the first round here at Santa Pod. So coming up to the line on her qualifying run, looking for that number one spot, a really hard charge away from the start line. This looks an excellent run from Anita Michaela, 6.02. She takes the number one spot. Well, with the news that on the Saturday of the three-day meeting, England's Barry Sheevels had recorded a 6.13 and netted himself the number two spot, all eyes were therefore focused on the other Brits in qualifying. This is Rob Turner, running alongside him Mick Gledow in the Time Machine, and Turner, with an all-new TFX engine and setup in his car, runs a 6.32 and grabs himself the number 6 spot. Well, this is European Top Alcohol, so we have visitors from abroad. The two funny cars, the Penzol yellow funny car of Switzerland's Erzurbacher, and in the opposing lane, Lex June from Holland in the other oil car, the Valvoline car. Well, side by side, great pair of qualifying runs, and a 6.23 for Lex June gets him the number 4 qualifying spot. That 6.33 for Erzurbacher was eventually eclipsed by a run of 6.22, which got Erz the number 3 qualifying spot. Well, once more, we're back with the Time Machine and the Gledow brothers. Mick Gledow in the hot seat, Bob Gledow behind, guiding the car back. And in fact, on the Saturday of the meeting, Bob Gledow had run for the first time down into the 6.7s. But on this particular run, the blower lets go, off comes the belt, but all that smoke was just oil on the headers. So no major problem for him. With that run, however, in the opposing lane, Alan Jackson scored a 6.39 and got himself the number 7 qualifying spot. Well, the last man to make it into the top 8 for the eliminations is this man, Michael Kagerad from Sweden, last year's champion and, of course, the number 1 plate holder for 1996. Well, he'd previously run a time of 6.25 and was looking on this run to go quicker to get in amongst the top 4. But unfortunately didn't, so ended up in the number 5 qualifying spot. So this is how they line up for the first round of Top Alcohol. Michaela against Gledow from Great Britain, June against Kagerad, Sheevels against Jackson, and Erzurbacher against Great Britain's Rob Turner. So Anita Michaela then comes out in her dragster, alongside her Mick Gledow from Great Britain. So it's Finland against Great Britain, and Mick Gledow is the man with the hill to climb here. Anita Michaela quite comfortably in there at the #1 qualifying spot with a 6-0. Mick Gledow some 3/4 of a second behind her, but very, very much together away from the start line. But it's Michaela all the way through, and just look at that car bouncing. Well, that run saw her achieve another 6.0 time, this time with a 3 on the end of it. Certainly, she is living up to her word. She wants the championship in 1996. Look at those two burnouts from the two funny cars. The Quaker State car furthest from the camera of Sweden's Michael Kagerad, and the man who won the Cannonball in 1996, Alex, or Lex June as he's known to his friends, in the Valvoline car. Well, certainly Kagerad and June very, very close on their qualifying. This could be absolutely anybody's race. They're away together. This looks very, very close indeed. And all the way through, there's a problem. There is a problem right at the top end for Lex June. Let's just watch that again. It was certainly June who had Kagerad covered on this run. He is improving this funny car, Lex June, so incredibly in 1996. But then if we watch very, very carefully, there's a flash from underneath Lex June's car. The race is over, and it was just that little damage to that engine, the blower letting go, that allowed Kagerad through to take the win. He recorded a time of 6.15. Well, here's our next pair. That was Barry Sheevels from Great Britain in the Oldsmobile Achieva. This is Alan Jackson, and in fact both of these Brits have been having major mechanical problems with both of their cars at this particular event. And in fact, Barry Sheevels, who recorded the second quickest time on the Saturday of this 3-day meeting, destroyed his engine and has had to renew absolutely everything on board this car. So he's coming out here with an unknown entity. Jackson's had mechanical problems with his car, and immediately there's a problem for Barry Sheevels, that explosion on the car. Al Jackson cruises through, takes the win, 6.47, 209 miles per hour. And you can see that flash under Barry's car. The supercharger lets go, and that's the end of his weekend. Alan Jackson moves on into the next round. Well, this is an Anglo-Swiss tussle. This is Rob Turner from Higham Ferries, and you can always see these long dragsters flexing when they come out of the burnouts. It's such an incredible sight. And Rob Turner reverses up, guided by his brother Steve, who is the crew chief on the car. Let's remember he was our #6 qualifier, having run a 6:32. Urs Erbacher in that yellow funny car in the opposing lane. The Pontiac was our #3 qualifier with a 6:22. So not much to choose between them at all. Up to the start line. This is going to be close between these two. Away together. And it's Erbacher up in smoke. Overpowers the track. He's been having a lot of handling problems with that car. And it's Rob Turner against the form book who takes the win. 6.38. He goes through into the next round. And just look at Erbacher lighting up those tyres. Well, we move into Supergas, the class where everyone has to try to run to a 9.90 index. If you go quicker than 990, then you get eliminated, unless your opponent goes quicker than 990 by a greater margin than you. Here's our first pair in the Chevrolet Nova, closest to the camera. That's Brendan Clancy. Furthest away, the professor of Supergas racing, Alan O'Connor, with his 1948 Ford Anglia. Small block Chevrolet in there. Big block Chevrolet in the opposing lane. Don't forget, they're looking for 9.90. They're looking for 0.4 reaction times. And normally Al O'Connor is the one who takes the win. But this time around, Brendan Clancy, the new kid on the block, shows in the way home. O'Connor goes every which way but straight from the start line. Well, the whole point about Supergas is you try and run with a start line reaction time as close to 0.4 as you can get it. Here's our next pair, the Camaro of Terry Gibbs from Woking in Surrey, the XR3i from Psycho Phil Druitt in the opposing lane. And this is what normally happens when Phil Druitt is in a tussle on the start line. He tries to psych out the opponent, sits there for quite some time, but Druitt goes in first this time. And and they're almost away together. A 0.53 reaction time for Druitt, a 0.54 for Terry Gibbs. Who's going to get to the top end first? It's Gibbs who's out in front and just gets across that finish line, a nose in front of Phil Druitt. And just look at the way they power on. Big block Chevrolet in the Camaro, big block fat Ford power in that XR3i. But it was so close on that finish line, just the nose separated them. Here's our next pair. This is Frank Mason, a man who's having a very good year in Supergas in 1996, in fact leading the charge in that championship, but up against the number 2 man from last year, Southend's Brian Pateman in the Firebird. And once more, they're away with very good reaction times, a 0.45 for Brian Pateman, a 0.51 for Frank Mason. And it's Pateman who takes it. He won that on the start line. Look how close that was. 9.94 to 9.93, and Frank Mason losing out. Well, Jim McGee with the Nightmare Cavalier has been having a much better season now. He started off 1996 miserably, blowing so many engines and transmissions, but now he's got a new engine in there courtesy of Jeff Bull, and Jeff standing behind looking on to see how his engine is going to fare. And this is a rerun almost of the final in Hockenheim. Peter Lane is the man in the white Camaro in the opposing lane. Start line reactions, a 0.48 for Jim McGee, a 0.46 for Pete Lane. And it looked as though Peter Lane got there first, but he was later disqualified for deep staging. So even though they had identical times, it was Jim McGee who was given the win. As we watch the track dry, this is Ronnie Picardo with Roaring Thunder putting some heat in the track. It's still very damp, still very cold, and we've still got a lot of racing to see. Coming up in part 2, the Pro Mods Top Fuel bike at a swift peak at the Top Fuel Dragsters. Well, welcome back to Sandipod, to the Summer Nationals, and there's not too much summer around this weekend. But let's just warm our hearts up with a little bit of action from the Top Fuel cars, here to practice for the World Finals coming up in the middle of September. And this is a man who always entertains the crowd thoroughly. This is Denmark's Jens Nebo, last year's #1 plate holder, the current Top Fuel champion. And he's been here practicing all weekend long. And we reckon that he's got a bracket car now with this. He can run consistently down into the 5.2s, and he does it again, 5.22. No wonder the crowd are cheering this very, very hard-working young Danish team. And we're into Pro Modifieds now with one of the drivers having had some problems. Here's Andy Robinson.
We worked all night until 1 o'clock this morning. We put a new piston in the engine, new rods in #1, retuned it, take a little bit of the power out of the car, and we've put ourselves in a very comfortable fourth position.
Well, he did indeed. This is the run. 7.09 for Andy Robinson. Okay, let's have a word with Neil Taylor. Neil, your #3 qualifier, 7.08. You're running really on the car's best times at the moment, aren't you?
Very much so. 7.03 is our previous best. We burnt the motor earlier this year, as you probably remember, at the main event. All a bit of a drama for us. We've been nibbling away very gently and very slowly, trying to get back on a tune, trying to get some consistency in the car. We've achieved that now. We're very happy with the results this weekend.
Well, here's Gordon Appleton, the final demand Camaro. Let's have a word from him. You're qualified in the #2 spot with a 7.03. You're 100th of a second behind the #1 man, and then everyone else is bunched up behind you. How does that make you feel? Does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel worried about your opposition?
No, it doesn't make me feel worried about the opposition. It's much better for the spectators as well when they see things so much closer together.
Well, he's almost Mr. Entertainment. Let's have a word with our #1 qualifier, Bert Englefield.
And we've just been chipping away at the nitro system, and last meeting at the Campbell we put the second stage on when we ran the 696.
So you're feeling pretty good then?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Well, he must be one of the quietest, shyest men in drag racing, Bert Englefield, but he lets his car do the talking for him. This was his #1 qualifying shot, 7.02, 194 miles per hour, and this is how they line up for our first round in Pro Modified. Excitement all the way. We'll be looking for sixes and we'll be looking for 200 miles per hour. Well, because he was that number one qualifier, Bert Engelfeld, his real name is Phil. For some reason, everybody calls him Bert. Bert Engelfeld is our number one qualifier and gets this bye run in the Toyota Supra. So does he just sort of go slowly? Not one little bit of it. Powers the car right the way down the track. It's another 7-0, just under 200 miles per hour, 195 miles per hour. Well, that's his solo run. He earned that by being the number one qualifier. And don't forget, these cars produce something like 2,000 horsepower. They have very large V8 engines in them, running with nitrous oxide injection. Gordon Appleton with the Final Demand, our number two qualifier, ruled David and Goliath, as the opposing lane man will always tell you. That's Michael Cheeley in that red and grey Calibra, the man from the West Midlands in the opposing lane, the smallest engine in the Pro Modified circuit. And this time around, Cheeley goes every which way but straight. Gordon Appleton just powers his way through, 7.14, 198 miles per hour. Mike Cheeley, all he can do is just cruise through slowly at the top end. Let's just have a quick look at that again. And you can see Mike Cheeley really trying to get the power down with that little Calibra and going every which way but straight. He just could not hold it on a straight line. Well, the one thing the crowds absolutely adore with these cars is the long, smoky burnouts. This is Andy Robinson with his 800 series Rover Coupe. Andy is up against Nick Davies. Nick Davies, surprisingly, not doing a burnout here, but we know that he hurt his engine during qualifying. So it could be that he's saving the engine for the run. Here they come into stage. The greens are on, and Robinson is away on his own. Well, Nick Davies just going to the start line to get points in the 1996 championship. And Andy records a 7.10, so he didn't take it slowly at all, 197 miles per hour. And just look at these side-by-side burnouts. Really warming up those huge rear slicks. These guys use tyres that would normally fit onto a top alcohol car or dragster, so they have to get them really, really warm to try and get traction away from the start line. Dave Mingay this weekend trying out an all-new combination in the Hellraiser Calibra. He's up to 698 cubic inches, 11.4 litres of power in that car. These machines are massive and they're away together. Well, this is going to be a close one between these two. Who's going to get to the top end first? Smoke out of Neil Taylor's car, but it is Neil Taylor who takes the win in that Chevy Lumina, 7.12 at 192 miles an hour. But on the end of that, just a tenth of a second between them. Well, let's move back to the practice runs that we've been looking at here throughout the weekend for Top Fuel. And this is the crowd favourite, the darling of the crowd here at Santa Boni. In fact, everywhere she is, this lady is such a great ambassadoress for drag racing. Vivica Avested from Sweden. And she really uncorks one, then the engine lets go. Well, big explosion, but still with that big explosion, she records a 5.62. And let's just watch that again. You can just see the power and the fury of an engine explosion from a nitro-burning race car. Okay, we're back with Peter Lance. Peter put in a couple of passes with us at the weekend. And just reversing up here, waving to the crowd. Well, we saw Jens Nebo a little while ago. Jens has caught onto this trick. He's always waving to everybody when he reverses up. In fact, he has been spotted waving to the crowd during the burnout. But Peter just does a practice launch with the Optima Batteries-sponsored car and powers his way through. We're now on to Top Fuel bike. And this has been the star of the show, this all-new machine from the Brackvogel family. Phil Brackvogel, the man sitting in the saddle, brother Frank, the man who does the wrenching on this machine. And this is his first season out on this machine, having had a sabbatical of about 4 years. But it's like he's never been away. Just look at the speed of this machine. absolutely powers through, 6.92, 192 miles an hour. There are only 3 top fuel bikes here this weekend, and Phil Brachvogel, by virtue of the fact he was our number 1 qualifier, earned himself a bye run into the final to meet one of these two. Closest to the camera, Phil Bainbridge. Further away, Steve Woolett. These machines producing some 800 horsepower. This is going to be close. 6.88 to 7.16. It's Bainbridge who's in the final. Okay, we're into the semi-finals now of Supergas, the 990 index class. Don't forget, they're looking for 9.90, looking for reaction times of 0.40. Brendan Clancy with a Nova, closest to the camera. Furthest away, Jim McGee with a Cavalier. Well, if you're a Cavalier driver, you've got to cheer Jim on. And they're away together. Who's going to get to the top end first? It's very, very close as they head towards the top end. It's McGee who takes the win. He's really on form this weekend. 9.93 sees him through into the final, where he'll meet the winner of these two, the classic General Motors confrontation. Camaro closest to the camera, Firebird furthest away, Gibbs and Pateman. And Terry Gibbs gets there first, but breaks out. 9.79. He's under that 990 index, so he's out. Brian Pateman is in the final. Well, we're looking for our finalists now in top alcohol. And Anita Michaela meets Michael Kangrad in the first of the semis. And then an all-British tussle, Alan Jackson against Rob Turner. But here's our first pair. Well, with their burnouts, Kangarad with the Quaker State-sponsored funny car against the headache tablet-sponsored car, the Buracaps car of Finland's Anita Michaela. And Michaela certainly has got power on her side here this weekend. Can she stay in front of Kangarad? But it's Kangarad who takes it. A better start line reaction for Michael Kangarad sees him takes the win. 6.13. Well done to him. That was so close. The two Brits going with their burnout, Rob Turner, and once again it's funny car against dragster. Alan Jackson in the Oldsmobile Achiever, furthest away from the camera. He trips over the start line. Well, that was a real muddle with these two. So no times and speeds for Alan Jackson. A red light for Rob Turner, but he is awarded the win. That time of 6.53 recorded. But then this happened. Every drag racing fan's nightmare. The rains came down and racing ground to a halt despite intensive efforts. This was the end of our Summer Nationals. From Santa Pod, a sad and wet goodbye.